All right. Good morning and welcome to this LinkedIn Live all around leveraging project execution for any organization's success. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Colleen Kranz, and I'll be your host today on this topic. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's dig in. All right, so I'd like to introduce this morning Klaus Lemke. Klaus is a managing principal at LeanProject. He's a construction leadership expert, and he's also author of the book Better Building. Klaus and LeanProject help transform projects and organizations by mobilizing practices, people, and structures for leaders in the built environment. All right, we're going to welcome Klaus.
Good morning, Colleen. Thank you for that introduction.
Yes, thanks for being here. Okay, so those joining, if you have any questions, go ahead and just type those right in and we'll pop those up as we get going. And we're going to get started. All right, Klaus, tell me a little bit about yourself and your background.
So like you said, I'm a managing principal of LeanProject. I feel very fortunate to be in this spot, kind of standing on the shoulders of giants who started the company. But my background is structural engineering is my degree. And I always say I was very lucky to land at a company that had an amazing training program. I started as a structural designer for Chicago Bridge and Iron a million years ago, early in my career. But they had a policy of putting all their engineers through all the different parts of the company. And this company built heavy plate structures like water towers and oil storage tanks. And it was a very integrated operation. Like the designers designed it so it could be fabricated, the fabricators fabricated it so it could be erected, right? And the whole thing was designed with a customer at the end. And the thing that really kind of formed my opinion of the construction world was how that company integrated everything together on behalf of the customer. Right. It was just very natural. And we studied Deming, total quality management, and all that stuff back then. This was before, lean really was a word. But I did that for quite a few years early in my career and just loved it. I eventually had to stop moving around the country because I had kids. So I settled and I worked for a couple different general contractors in Wisconsin. And, there I got to kind of go up through the ranks of project management to executive leadership and actually help start a company and help start offices for companies in the Milwaukee area. But when I got into the general construction world, it just felt broken. There was no integration. There was no coordination. Everything was so disconnected, and it kind of planted this seed. Like I remember how it worked, back when we had this integrated approach, and that led me down a path to kind of search and find different ways of operating. And luckily I found Greg Howell with LeanProject, and he helped a lot in the companies I was working with at the time. But of course, eventually I called Greg and said, "Hey, Greg, tell me about this consulting thing." And that was, 13 years ago. So I had the great pleasure of being able to work with Greg Howell. And he's since passed away, but while he was still the president of this company and the leader of the Lean Construction Institute back at the time.
Wow. And what is the Lean Construction Institute for those that may not know?
Yeah, so LCI is an organization that was started by the same guys that started LeanProject. So Greg Howell, Glenn Ballard, Todd Zabel, Iris Tomaline started LeanProject. They kind of also started LCI. They all kind of went their own separate ways pretty early on in the process, but it was an organization that it still is an organization intended to kind of transform the construction industry. And that was why they formed it. And it's been a powerful force in our industry ever since.
All right. So let's talk about then LeanProject. So tell me a little bit more about that business. Why are they different?
So the name LeanProject suggests that we're applying lean ideas to transform the construction industry, and that's absolutely true. And like I said, it was founded by industry leaders and a lot of partners in the industry who really wanted to make a difference. I think there's a little bit of a misconception though about LeanProject that the people who formed it were trying to copy Toyota and become lean that way. And I mean, there was some of that going on, and certainly the invention of the last planner system and a lot of those techniques and practices kind of can relate to that. But there was a really strong emphasis on recognizing that things in teams happen between people and building those connections. There were some early pioneers, including Hal Maycumber and others, that were very serious and knowledgeable about commitment-based management. which is a technique and a way of managing organizations and teams that was really invented by Fernando Flores. So too much history there, but that focus on building networks of teams and trust has been the central point of the company from the beginning, and it's still kind of how we operate today. So, in the history of the company, it was around first integrated project delivery, applying last planner system, really working on some of the largest projects in the country and even internationally with new concepts, new ideas about how to put teams together. More recently, I've been here for 12 years. My partner, Jason Klaus, same last name as my first name, but no relation there. So Jason's been my partner in the business for over 10 years, and Jason's really latched on to the commitment-based management. He's actually in the middle of getting his PhD in construction around commitment-based management. So that's really central to how we see the world, and a huge part of kind of how we work with clients.
Great. So really, we have these roots and tools, but it sounds like LeanProject really encompasses so much more than those fundamental tools. So this LinkedIn Live is really about success. So maybe let's break that down a little bit. So to you, what exactly does a successful project look like?
Yeah, I always say, you know it when you see it. So for the people that are listening, I mean, you've all been on really great projects and really lousy projects, and you could probably describe the difference. But the trick is, how do you create that great project over and over again? And I think what we look for is, I think of it in two ways. First, I think when you walk on a project where everything is clicking, you can feel it, right? The project is quiet, calm, organized, and everything's running smoothly. But the schedule is going so fast at the same time, and it's almost like, how do we put these two things together? Like, how is it they can be so smooth and still be moving fast? Because we're used to thinking about, if it's fast, it's chaotic, right? So that's like the first sign that a project is running well. I think the other thing is the people. And I remember we were working on an Intel project, and we were working with the foreman at the pipe fitter and electrician level. And there was a foreman, I think his name was Keith. And we were kind of teaching daily huddles, and I was coaching him and his team around daily huddles. And we just finished our daily huddle down in the fab of an Intel project. And as I was leaving, I was headed up to another meeting, and Keith was like, "Hey, Klaus, I just want to let you know this stuff is great." It was nice to hear that. And I said, "Hey, thanks, Keith. We'll talk again." And I turned to go away, and Keith was like, "No, Klaus, stop. This stuff changes everything. The way we're working here changes everything." And I still didn't have much time to talk, so I kind of bugged out. But my next meeting was with all the executives from the trade contractors, including the owner of the company that Keith worked for. So as we were getting ready to start our meeting, I grabbed him and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know that Keith really is embracing this and appreciates it." And he kind of looked at me. He's like, "Oh, you don't know about Keith?" I'm like, "No, what's up about Keith?" He's like, "Oh, like 6 weeks ago, he quit. Like, he said, I can't do this anymore.
Wow.
Like this, I cannot live like this. It's too stressful. I don't sleep at night. I'm getting ulcers." It was just like a miserable experience. And so many people in construction have that experience.
Wow.
So when someone like Keith sees that there's a different way, a new possibility, a different way to behave as a team and eliminate some of that stress, to me, that's a home run, right? So when I look for success, I look for that in the people on the projects. It makes their life better, and they can enjoy their work again, right? Most people got into construction because they love it.
Yeah.
And you look at how many people are just surviving and trying to get to the end of a project. It just doesn't have to be that way. And that's really what we try to do, is get that to happen on projects.
Yeah. Wow. What a totally different experience. Say, we have a question. Heather Foxhill she made a comment: the term innovation itself is about a sigmoid curve approach to previous inventions. Leap off of what Toyota did, and you can proudly say that you have pioneered what we now call lean agile. You are fine-tuning it in your own way. In your own way. Construction needs this. Excellent.
Yeah, I absolutely love that idea. I think for us, the struggle has been, lean means different things to different people, and when someone has this perception of lean being, oh, it's about a checklist and a stopwatch. Oh, so you bring checklists and stopwatches to construction. And I think because people can define it in their own way, it can sometimes lead people down the wrong understanding, right? So we talk about it as it's this holistic approach to building teams, and really that's about trust and the connection between people. And all those lean checklists and stopwatches are all legitimate, but sometimes for us it's like we want to step back and see the big picture a little bit more than maybe we'll talk about this later, but it's pretty common for us to get a call from somebody that says, hey, I want to do lean on my project, or I want to do last planner system on my project. And for us, that's like the beginning of a conversation that maybe kind of tells us, yep, this could be a great client, or no, this is not going to work for us. And the question we always ask is, well, what are you trying to do that you can't do today? Why do you want lean? And when the answer is, I got to shorten the schedule, my people are miserable, I got to improve my retention, I got clients to keep happy, or I need more profit, whatever the solution, whatever they're trying to accomplish, that's the reason to do something lean. Not I want to implement some tools, right? So the reasoning behind it is really important for us.
Right. That's great. Another comment here, lack of trust is so visible on bad projects. And LeanProject has an incredible talent for building that and impacting projects in a positive way. Love it. Thank you so much for that comment.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. And I think for us, that's what it's all about. When you can build trust, it kind of opens up new possibilities for teams, things that don't even seem in the realm of possibility when you start. As soon as you build those teams, that trust and a strong team, then everything changes.
So how does this, so we talked about projects. How does this show up when an entire organization is successful?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, this construction revolution, really, the big projects get a lot of attention. But I think for us, especially like in the last 8 or 10 years, we found a lot of success working with construction organizations. So, that could be, the construction organization at Cleveland Clinic that does $500 million a year or something like that. But it could also be local general contractor, who does $50 million a year, and they're tapped out. They're stuck at the top of their market. They can't expand. Maybe they don't have good profitability. And I think thinking about making these things work, not just on those projects of those companies, but also in the company itself, and putting that connection together is really the key. So when we think about, how to create this in an organization, it's about the same thing. It's that flow that you see on a job site happening in the organization. And it's that trust and the ability to really create new possibilities for the entire team. And for a construction company, that's your employees, but it's all your trade partners, your design partners, your owner partners, and thinking about how to create that trust in a network in a consistent way as part of your operating system is really what makes it work for companies.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit more of like examples around this, like how organizations are leveraging these concepts to be successful. Do you have any examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. We've done it with a lot of different companies. I would say, like the typical, I don't know, success story would be, we worked with a company in Central Illinois, and they were the biggest show in town. Central Illinois is not Chicago, right? So it's a very small market, not a lot around, and they were very good at what they did. They were a good construction company. But what they found out, and they're probably doing $100 million a year or something like that. And what they found out was, they got to do the medical office buildings and the renovations and all those kinds of projects for the healthcare systems in town. But when one of those healthcare systems wanted to build a new $200 or $300 million hospital, they weren't even considered. And it was a wake-up call for them. Like, how can this be? And what they found is they didn't really have a way to describe what they do, right? They had good project managers, good superintendents, good field crews, but they didn't have a way to say, this is how we run projects. And so for that company, what we really did was we focused on bringing stability to their projects, right? So consistency around really solid practices. And from there, now you've got this predictable, not only outcomes for the client, but predictable profit margins. I always say for construction companies, one bad project wipes out 20 good projects worth of profit, right? And it really is that severe. So get rid of that possibility. No more bad projects, right? So all projects succeed. Now they've got this stability in this place to grow from, and now they have a story to tell. And I think that transformation over the course of a few years allowed them to start landing those big projects, and even expanding beyond their kind of home base to other markets that had similar types of clients. And starting with stability on the project side allowed them to start making improvements in their organization that really leveraged their growth and their ability to kind of take their company to the next level.
Wow, that's fantastic. So, as for those listening, what does it actually take for companies to have that kind of success? Can we break that down a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's different than a successful project. I think a successful project, it's usually pretty obvious what the goal is, what the vision is for the project. It takes some work sometimes to get it down so everybody understands it. But we know we have to build something in a certain amount of time for a certain amount of money, and it's got to do these things for the owner. So it's pretty clear. In a company, sometimes that's not so clear. Like what are we about? What are we trying to do? What are we striving for as a team? So I think having some clarity of purpose, like what is it that we want to do that we can't do? What's the vision of the company? That's really important to establish that. And I think once that's established, then leadership needs to learn how to inspire the company with that. And that's really about, in the commitment-based management world, that's really a thing about creating possibilities. And so often, I think companies are limited by, I don't want to say it's their imagination, but what they believe, what they perceive as reality. So in this market, companies like me can only build 4-story stick apartment buildings, right? My company can't go build a medical office building, or my company can't build the new public library. So that possibility of opening up, what does it look like? How could we attract these companies? We have good people, they're capable of doing these things. We have processes and systems. Why don't we branch out? And I think most of the time it's limited by the vision of the leaders, right? So creating that vision and then kind of proliferating it to everyone in the company so that you can take action on it. And I think that's really important. Now, executing project well is really a foundation of that, but that is what leads the company to the next place, right? Is the vision of the leaders and being able to kind of make it real for the whole company.
Sure. Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the individual leaders of those companies. So how can leaders make this change in their companies?
Yeah, it's we think of it as when you think about a company, the three kind of pieces we think of are like the structure. What's the organizational structure look like? Practices they use, things like lean practices, like last planner system, but even reporting systems and KPIs and all those sorts of things. And the third thing is skills. Like what skills do the people have to have? And I think that really comes from the commitment-based management mindset and being able to move as a leader with confidence and clarity, and to be able to lead is really not a natural skill for a lot of people, right? Something that has to be learned. And I think when leaders realize that, it's a turning point for their companies. When they realize this isn't just gut feel and bootstraps sort of thing. This is like, I've got a job to do here. I've got to lead the way, and I got to take it seriously. So I think that when they realize that, and they realize what's on their shoulders, and then they realize they don't need to do it by themselves, it really is a chance to kind of set a new path for a company.
Wow. So what type of company, like what size company would be a best fit to leverage some of these concepts that you're talking about, Klaus?
Yeah, there's a perception that these things only work in big companies, especially the lean stuff. I think our experience has shown that, anytime there's two people who have to work together, you can improve that. And so for us, we've worked with all sizes of companies with really good success. And sometimes that's, the $50 million company that wants to become the $100 million or the $200 million company. We did work years ago with a company that installed pools, residential pools. We did, a couple hundred a year, and they had to find a way to do it better. So I think, when you think about the size, it's really less important. The size is less important than the aspirations, right? A company that does $500 million a year and is just fine where they are and don't want to improve or grow, there's really nothing to do there, right?
Mm.
But a company that does $50 million or $100 million a year in construction and wants to grow, open new markets, get out of a pigeonhole of, hey, all I do is hard bid municipal projects, and I want to get into the private development world, or I want to get into the healthcare world. Like when there's that drive, that can turn on a spark for a company.
Right, right. So when you work with your clients, how do you engage with them to help them?
Yeah, I think that's probably something that makes us different from most consultants is we really don't do very much, training and then we leave, right? We almost never do that. When we engage with a company, it's as a partner for the company, and we are committed to the success of the company. So that's we might be helping on these 3 projects, but there's a problem over here, or we see a problem in the leadership of the company. So our commitment is to help make the company better and help them achieve their goals. So in a lot of ways, we're that kind of internal resource that kind of helps that way. And I think most of the companies that we're working with, they don't always start out that way, but most of them are long-term, ongoing engagements where we're just a resource to help them be successful.
And when you start working with a client, what does that experience look like in the beginning? Do they feel something different after a while? And how long does that typically take? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think most clients are probably surprised how direct we are. One of the things we do with most companies, we'll do an organizational assessment early on in the process, and that's we'll see what they're doing in their company, but we'll talk to their customers, their clients, their employees, and their partners, and just see what's going on. And the result of that assessment will be some very direct feedback, and sometimes. I would say the feedback kind of falls in a couple of categories. There's I had no idea that was going on. Like I had no idea that no one trusts this leader and
Wow.
whatever. Right? That's not very common. Mostly it's, yeah, I knew that. We just don't know what to do about it. Right? I know that we're seen in the market as a hard bid contractor that's not very trustworthy. Or whatever we find. So getting it on the table and learning how to talk about it in a very direct way is a skill. And people it takes some time to learn to operate in a new way, but that is when you can get serious about making a change, right? When you can take those things, put them in the crosshairs and say, this is what we want to fix. This is what we want to work on.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm thinking when I hear what you're saying on the organizational success side, I think of strategic operating systems. And so how is what LeanProject does different than more of the strategic operating system?
Yeah, I think for starters, we recognize that a company is we could call it a project-driven organization, right? So it's an organization that lives to execute projects, but just executing projects is not enough. So I think for us, there are a lot of consultants and even some operating systems like the EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, is an example of this. A lot of our companies are using EOS to run their companies, and it's very effective. It's a great way to kind of help create a vision and execute on goals and make steady progress throughout a year or a quarter or whatever your timeline is. So I think those things are all great. The thing for us that we focus on is connecting the company operations to the project operations. So how do you manage a fleet of 20 projects at a time? What do you have to know about each project? How do you know if a project's in trouble? How do you create an environment where the project leaders are coming to the leadership team of the company, not the leadership team of the company is peeking over the fence to see what's happening, right? And so creating that open channel of communication and transparency where it's okay to ask for help. And really, through that process, the projects get better as the company gets better, and the projects can serve to meet the vision and goals of the company. All right, so connecting that all together is really the key.
So we talked a little bit around this question, but what truly makes LeanProject different from other consultants?
Yeah, I think it's our focus on people. We really, I mean, Years ago, so I've been here for 12 years. It was pretty common for us to, get a call and say, "Hey, can you come do a last planner boot camp?" And we would do that. And then we'd walk away and nothing changed. And, we started recognizing that we want to be in the room where the change is happening. We don't want to be on the sidelines. And I think we bring value when we can be committed to what happens next. So, first of all, I think being committed to the people. It's pretty normal for us to be working with a project team, and someone will come and say, "Hey, I've got this problem. I think I'm going to quit."
Mm.
Right? Something's not working for me here, or I don't know what to do about this architect. Right? They don't answer my questions, and they're killing the project. And I just blew a gasket on the phone with them, and now I need help fix this. Those are people issues, and every project is full of them. And I think for us, that's what we pay attention to. Those are the places that you make the change. And the systems are part of that and the processes. But if you do it without the people, it just doesn't matter, right? So I think for us, it's really intently focusing on the people and helping improve the situation for everybody on a project. And that's really where the success for an organization comes from, or for a successful project.
That's great. I'm curious. So so we talked about project-based companies. Does that typically mean construction companies, or are there other types of companies that would benefit?
Yeah, our experiences in construction. My background is in construction. Jason's background is as a superintendent and a leader in construction. So that's where we're comfortable. But I would say, the project-driven organizations that we support are really, general contractors are at the top of the list. Trade contractors are right there. Designers and engineering firms also have the same situation. And then I think there's also, what we would consider a project-driven organization within a company. So, I mentioned the construction organization within Cleveland Clinic, for example, or within Intel. So those are companies that are constantly building, they're putting teams together. They're not general contractors, but they have some of the same issues, right? So when we think about project-driven companies, it's really the bottom line is supported by project work, and it's necessary to be able to deliver projects successfully over and over again for those companies to succeed.
That type. So we talked about a lot of different concepts today. If someone is listening and really experiencing some of those pains, what's a good way for them to start on a new path?
I think first realizing it is part of it. So there's great organizations. The Lean Construction Institute is a great place to talk to other people who are trying to make a difference. You mentioned our book, Better Building.
Yes.
I think, this is. It's been 5 years since we published this. And I would say it was our first attempt at describing what it takes to make a company successful. It's a great way to get the gears turning. But I would also add, reach out to your network. I think for us, we talk to a lot of companies for a long time that either never become customers or maybe don't become customers for years. And that's okay. Greg Howell kind of had a vision, or I shouldn't say it was a vision, a way of being that really permeated through the company. And he was a guy that wanted to see things get better. And that's still a really important part for us. So we're willing to help. We're willing to come look and see what's going on. We don't only work for clients. We're there as a resource for the industry. So I think if there's a question, or if you're stuck or you just want to talk about ideas, send me a note, reach out to us through our website or through LinkedIn, and we're happy to have a conversation. If you're local, we can meet somewhere. If you're not local, we're probably in your town working on something anyways. So it's easy for us to connect. And I think that's what we're here for. We really love that connection, and it's what makes us a valuable partner.
That's great. That's great. So again, reach out to Klaus via DM. I just want to share a couple comments here. So Mike, thanks so much for the comment about the book. He said, great book here. Jack commented, great. Klaus Lemke, Better Building is a great book. Awesome. Thanks, Jack. Very cool. Well, really appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions, just feel free to send a note to Klaus. A DM on LinkedIn will work just great. We'll be following back up with a survey. We'd really appreciate your time. Let us know if the information was valuable. And if you would like a copy of Klaus's book, you can just check a box in that survey and we'll send you a copy of the book. And any last thoughts, Klaus, before we close?
No, I think I'm excited about this. Is the first time we've done this, right? So I'm excited about this new format. I would love to hear from people about what they think of it, and if we should do more, and how we kind of use this as a way to reach out to people. Our goal is to improve the industry and to make lives better in construction. So that's what this is about for us. And any advice you have how to kind of leverage that and improve on that, I would really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. I hope you have a great rest of your day. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.